This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Biden's facing new calls to finally close the U.S. military prison at Guantánamo. Since 2002, over 770 men and boys have been held at the prison in Cuba. Of them, only 8 have been convicted of a crime. 3 of the convictions were later overturned. Today, the prison's population is down to 40. According to the New York Times, the U.S. spends a staggering $13 million per prisoner each year. President George W. Bush opened the prison in January 2002, just months after the September 11th attacks. President Obama campaigned on closing Guantánamo within his first year, but he failed to fulfill his pledge. He was fought by Congress. President Trump moved to expand Guantánamo during his presidency. Now the future of the prison lies with President Biden. During a presidential debate in 2019, PBS moderator Yamiche Alcindor questioned then-candidate Biden about Guantánamo.
Vice President Biden, why couldn't you close Guantánamo Bay? Why couldn't the Obama administration close Guantánamo Bay?
We attempted to close Guantánamo Bay, but you have to have congressional authority to do it. They've kept it open. And the fact is that we, in fact, think it's the greatest, it is an advertisement for creating terror.
The White House recently pledged to conduct a robust review of options to close the prison. Supporters of closing Guantánamo include Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Shortly after Biden was inaugurated in January, 7 former prisoners penned an open letter to Biden. They wrote, quote, "Many of us were abducted from our homes in front of our families and sold for bounties to the U.S. by nations that cared little for the rule of law. Some of us had children who were born in our absence and grew up without fathers. Others experienced the pain of learning that our close relatives died back home, waiting in vain for news of our return. Waiting in vain for justice. That's what you must contend with and change," they wrote. One of the 7 authors of the letter was Mohamedou Ould Slahi, a Mauritanian man who was held without charge for 14 years, during which time he was repeatedly tortured. He was once falsely accused of being one of Guantánamo's most high-value prisoners. His story is told in a new film just out called The Mauritanian. He will join us later in the broadcast. The director and cast of The Mauritanian appeared in a video released by Amnesty International, urging the Biden administration to close the Guantánamo Bay prison. This is director Kevin McDonald and actors Shailene Woodley and now Golden Globe Award-winning actress Jodie Foster.
We are part of the new film, The Mauritanian. The movie is about Mohamedou Slahi, who was tortured and imprisoned for years and never charged with a crime.
He and almost 800 other men have passed through the terrifying doors of the detention center at Guantánamo Bay.
Guantánamo is a symbol of torture, indefinite detention, and injustice.
Join us to tell President Biden.
Close Guantánamo once and for all.
And end indefinite detention.
But first, we're joined by Nancy Hollander, who represented Mohamedou Ould Slahi, played by Jodie Foster in the new film. She is joining us from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Nancy Hollander, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about the efforts to close Guantánamo and why you fought for so many years for this, both representing Mohamedou, who we'll hear from in a minute, as well as another man who is still a prisoner at Guantánamo?
Hi, Amy, can you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Okay, great. We've had some audio problems. You know, I fought for this for years because Mohamedou is an innocent man. He was tortured in Guantánamo. They knew early on that he was innocent, certainly after the torture ended, and they realized that his confessions were fake. And yet they made no effort to release him. And we finally won a habeas case for him in front of Judge Robertson. We won in 2000, I believe it was 2000, the end of 2009, beginning of 2010. And the judge ordered that he be immediately released, that the government, even then, 2010, they had held him now for almost 9 years, still could not tip the balance on a civil case to show that they had any reason to detain him. However, the Obama administration, after saying that he wanted to close Guantanamo, the Justice Department appealed Mohamedou's case and several others that had won. And the Court of Appeals sent it back to the district court, and there it stayed. The district court did not act on it. I think perhaps the district courts, his was not the only one, had realized that when they went up to the Court of Appeals, they were going to lose. So they just stopped. We ultimately got Mohamedou out, finally through something else that Obama created called the Periodic Review Board, 6 intelligence agencies that had to be unanimous that he did not pose a significant threat to the United States and its allies. But that took another 6 years.
Mohamedou is one of 770 men and boys held at Guantanamo for this last almost 20 years. 8 of them have been convicted of crimes. 3 of those convictions were overturned. The vast majority of people, including Mohamedou, were never charged. And yet the government now is spending something like $500 million to maintain this prison a year.
Sorry, Amy, you've cut out.
The government is spending around $500 million to maintain the prison a year. Okay, let me go to Mohamedou Ould Slahi himself. He is joining us from Mauritania, imprisoned at Guantanamo for nearly 14 years without being charged with a crime. In a moment, we're going to talk about the film, major feature film that has just been released about you, Mohamedou. Welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about the letter you just wrote to President Biden? Mohamedou, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Great.
And Amy, thank you very much for having me on your program. Always a big admirer of your program. And I know you from Guantanamo already. Could you please repeat the last part of the question?
Can you talk about the letter that you signed, along with a number of other former prisoners at Guantanamo, calling on President Biden to close the prison?
Yes. So, I'm a big believer in democracy and human rights. And this is for selfish. I don't want to be treated outside the rule of law. And I don't want people from this part of the world, specifically North Africa and the Middle East, to be seen as underhumans, as people who are not deserving of human rights and being subjected to the rule of law, what I call open season. I don't want that anymore. This needs to stop. All we want is, just like your program, is democracy now. And yes, I co-signed that letter. And when you just read that portion, it sprang to my mind that seared image, the very last image I saw from my mother as she held her prayer beads in prayer, and she was blowing the prayer, and I could only see her through the rear view mirror until she disappeared. She disappeared forever. I had no chance never to see her again. The only thing I know about her is that last memory, the very last memory that I couldn't replace with anything else. And yes, I think I really believe that I sent 2 letters, by the way, Amy. One is this letter with the group, and one is a personal letter I wrote with my hands and sent with regular post to President Biden, because I really believe that he's a good man. And I think him having suffered the loss of his young wife and the loss of his, that's something that I couldn't even imagine how painful it is. And I think that he would close the prison because the prison does not belong. It's a disrespect to human rights, disrespect to human dignity, disrespect to the Constitution of the United States of America. And it tells more about those who made it than those who were dragged into it from all around the world.
I also want to tell our audience who is listening around the world, we're having some sound issues as we're speaking with Mohamedou Ould Slahi in Mauritania. And we're rejoined right now by Nancy Hollander, your attorney, on the telephone. Nancy Hollander, how much stock do you hold in President Biden first saying back last year when he was running that he felt that Guantanamo should be closed, that the defense secretary, the first African-American defense secretary in U.S. history, Lloyd Austin, says it should be closed, and the Biden administration says they're conducting an interagency review, Justice, State Department, Pentagon, of what should happen to Guantanamo?
I believe that if the political will is there, President Biden can get Guantanamo closed. 6 people there have been cleared for release, at least one of them for over 10 years. There's no reason why they can't find homes where those people will be safe, either back in their country or another country. Those people should be gone. They should get, that should be an easy start. The other 25 or so who are called forever prisoners, they need to find homes for them. We don't have forever prisoners, Amy, in our justice system. People who have been convicted are sometimes held for life without parole, but these people have never been charged. Some of them have been there since 2002. And for those people who have been charged, including my client, Ibrahim al-Nashiri, they have to provide every single right under the United States Constitution and get those cases resolved, either by trials or pleas or transfers. That can be done. The political will has to be there to do it.
There's also the latest news in the last weeks about vaccines, vaccines that were headed to Guantanamo for the, 40 prisoners that are held there now, and then they were barred from getting them, Nancy Hollander. The New York Times reported the Pentagon suspended the plans to provide the coronavirus to those remaining prisoners originally scheduled to get them in early February.
You know, Amy, that's just political. We're talking about 40 people here. 40 people are not going to use up vaccines that could be used by other people. And these prisoners have every right, just as prisoners in the United States do, to get this vaccine. Secondly, if they're concerned, if people are concerned about the health and safety of others in Guantanamo who are in contact with the prisoners, certainly they want to get them vaccinated. If they want to start these hearings again for those who've been charged, then everybody has to get vaccinated. It's ridiculous. It's just beyond ridiculous that 40 vaccines would make any difference to people getting them in the United States.